Okay, I'm gonna start the stream.
Okay, go ahead.
The camera in front of you is green. When it turns red, we go live.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
10 seconds, Marsha, unmuted.
All right, so welcome back, everybody, to another week, another episode of my show. I'm Jordan, and this is Taking a Different Perspective, where I talk, discuss, review, and analyze all things film and media. So today's episode is going to be another review episode. The movie Sorry to Bother You, it had a limited release on July 6th, and then a week later, it had a wider release on July 13th. And so, yeah, I would have to say that this was my most anticipated summer movie for a variety of reasons, but I'm going to get into all of that a little bit later. But yeah, this was something that I was really looking forward to see, and so I'm glad that it finally came out. Now, in regards to this other movie, Acrimony, y'all, I'm gonna just go ahead and be real with y'all right off the top. Acrimony is the worst movie that I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, I know that this movie came out however many months ago, so I guess that technically you could say that it's late, but this show is neither time nor place specific. So if I haven't seen something, or if I feel like I want to talk about it, then to me it's fair grounds. So this particular movie I did not see when it first came out, and for good reason. But when I was trying to figure out what it is that I could talk about in this show besides Sorry to Bother You, I had dwindled my options down to one of two things: either this Acrimony movie or go see Uncle Drew. Now, I ended up seeing Acrimony before I had the chance to see Uncle Drew, and when I saw how terrible this movie is, I said, oh no, I'm not about to pay to go see another movie when I could just go ahead and rip this movie to shreds. And so that is what we're gonna do. We're getting right into it. Like I said, Acrimony is the worst movie that I've ever seen. Now, have I seen worse movies? Sure. I mean, you know, besides being able to watch movies in theaters or on the streaming services or on cable, I also write for a movie review blog called Punch Drunk Critics. So I have seen some terrible movies, but because of the names that are attached to this movie, and because I can see right through what Mr. Tyler Perry was doing with this movie, the title stands. And so I'm sure that out there right now, there is a Black woman that is 40 plus that is ready to square up over this movie. Like, I'm sure right now, if you're watching this and you happen to fall within that category and you love this movie, you probably want to fight me. Like, I know that my own mother wants to fight me right now, but guess what? The title stands. So, Acrimony, written and directed by Tyler Perry. It stars Taraji P. Henson. I'm guessing this is Lyric Bent, Ajiana Alexis, and Antonio Madison. And the synopsis, I pulled this straight from IMDb. Said, a faithful wife, tired of standing by her devious husband, is enraged when it becomes clear that she has been betrayed. So, because this movie has been out for a couple of months now, I will be getting into spoiler territory. So if you don't want for things to be spoiled for you, then I suggest you click away from this review right now. But do come back at maybe like the 46 or 47 mark, maybe 48, because I am going to be talking about Sorry to Bother You, and you do want to hear that. But so yeah, I mean, first things first, guys, this movie was done in 8 days. I honestly feel like I shouldn't have to say anything else about a review for this movie, because that should tell you everything that you need to know. But I guess not. So besides that, the narration in this movie was not good. It honestly killed me. So within the film community, narration is essentially, it's pretty much looked down upon, because they see narration as this lazy technique that was meant to, that the filmmakers are using as a way to fix inherent problems within their story, whether it's a confusing plot or providing exposition. So basically, people see narration as providing unnecessary information that should have been worked into the story better. Now, I don't personally hold that view of narration. I've either seen movies where I feel like narration works, or where the narration isn't a huge problem to me. But in the case with this movie, that is not the case. all of the things that I just talked about as to why narration is looked at as being a bad thing, this movie does to the max. A good portion of the narration in this movie is Taraji telling us things that we can see visually or that should have been conveyed to us better visually. Now, I'm not going to go through every single example, but just to give you some examples. So at one point in the movie, Taraji or older Melinda says, "I was so mad." And it's like, yeah, girl, we can see that because your character looks mad. So what are you telling us this for? It's unnecessary. Or moving a little, I don't know if this was before or after, but there was another point in time where young Melinda is sitting outside in her Jeep outside of young Robert's trailer to see if he's cheating on her. All of the dialogue in that moment, in that scene, was so unnecessary because that all of that honestly should have been shown to us. And then moving a little bit further into the movie, once they're older, we see that, and we see them after like 18 years of marriage. Taraji says something like, "Another morning, no hug, no kiss." And it's like, okay, I understand that that was meant to show us that it was meant to tell us that their marriage is that it's not good. They're not happy with their marriage, but we can see all of that visually. Like the lights are really dim, the colors are extremely desaturated. We can see that there are no smiles on their faces when they when they're awake, and we can also see that they did not hug nor kiss. So again, what are you telling us this for? All of this is unnecessary. And I mean, even if throughout the movie, if we didn't get what we were supposed to be given visually, all of that should have been worked out before they actually shot the movie. All of that should have been worked out in the story. Or then when they actually went to shoot the movie, what the director, Tyler Perry, should have done is created those scenes that show us the things that needed to have been shown, or told his actors, hey, in this moment, you are feeling this, so you need to convey this, whether through your face or through bodily movements. Instead of essentially letting all of that slide and then going to Taraji after the fact and saying, hey, girl, I need for you to give me some voiceover work because I don't know if we were necessarily able to get what we were supposed to get. But if that isn't even the case, if let's say the narration was actually a part of the story from the very beginning, then that makes it even worse. Because what was the point of a bunch of this narration? And this problem actually gives way to a much larger problem that I've already talked about on this show before, that being the problem of telling and not showing. So this technique, show, don't tell, is pretty self-explanatory. You want to make sure that you're accurately conveying to your audience through showing them, or through like descriptive words if you're reading a book, instead of explicitly telling them things. Like, you want to be creative with the way in which you tell things to your audience. Now, this is something that is really important for more visual mediums like film, because they are, at the end of the day, visual. And what that means is that the visuals are important. And so when you're sitting here wasting our time telling us these things that could have or that should have been shown visually, then what you're telling me is that you're either lazy, you don't know what you're doing, or you just don't care. And I feel like I have a pretty good answer, or pretty good answer as to what the case might be in this scenario. Now, I do want to say that had the story been done in a book format, that I wouldn't be harping on the narration as much as I am, because then it would make sense, right? You wouldn't have the added element of visuals to help aid in telling your story. So, you know, when you're writing out your story, you want to make sure that you're being descriptive with the way in which you're conveying how your character is feeling at any given moment. But the movie is not a book, and so I had to harp on the narration. Now, with all of that being said, there were times where the narration wasn't so completely unnecessary. But even in those moments, the way in which Taraji delivers her lines, it was just so over the top and so cringeworthy that I could not stand behind it. Like, the best way that I could sum up Taraji's voiceover work in this movie is as if it was an amateur actress channeling a film noir stereotypical angry Black woman, but by way of impersonating a parodied Angela Bassett character. And so I'm sure that you all hear that description and you're like, what are you talking about? That's a lot. But if you see this movie and you actually try to understand that description, you would see that it is right on the nose. Like, I mean, right on the nose. Now, in terms of other performances, in terms of the acting period, it just wasn't good. I mean, the only person, and honestly, the only thing that I would really give props to in this movie is Taraji, even though her voiceover work was not good. She plays Insane really well. I mean, we all know that Taraji's a fine actress, so it's not like I didn't know that she was gonna, or I didn't think that she was gonna be able to do the role justice. Because I mean, you know, in her everyday life, she has a lot of energy and she's really extra, and so is her character in this movie, just in a really bad way. So yeah, I knew that she'd be able to, you know, do the role justice. But yeah, I'd never really seen seen her play a character like that. So I guess kudos to Tyler Perry for doing that. I don't know. But besides that, in terms of everybody else, the acting, it ranged from meh to not good. Like the older sisters, when everybody's older, just terrible. Now, in terms of the plot, again, I wasn't a big fan of it. It just felt like a bunch of and thens. It was like, and this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Like, everything just felt so contrived to the point where I started to view this movie as if Tyler Perry was actually parodying himself in all of the films that he has made. If you are actually familiar with his work, then I'm sure that as you're watching this movie, you will definitely be able to pinpoint out those moments where you can say, oh yeah, this is definitely a Tyler Perry movie. But then besides that, everything just goes so above and beyond to the point where I didn't even know if I was supposed to take what I was seeing seriously. Now, in terms of the movie itself or the story, it's split up between young and old characters. Now, in between that transition from going to young to old, there is a whole 18 years of marriage that is completely left out of the story. And it should not have been. Now, granted, I do understand that by adding in that aspect of the story that it would have made the movie much more longer than when it was, but I already thought that the movie was too long and that there were things that should have been taken out or that there were scenes that should have been shrunken down tremendously. But yeah, they definitely should not have skipped over those 18 years. And at the very least, they should have given us something, maybe like a montage to show exactly what transpired over these 18 years. And I say that because I do think that the characters themselves suffered tremendously because to me, they were just so inconsistent and it made me really confused while watching this movie. So we have young Melinda, right? She's dumb and she is in love, and then we can also see that she may be a bit out there because of the way in which she reacts to Robert cheating on her. But after that, when we actually go to older Melinda, when you compare young Melinda to old Melinda, she was never crazy in the way that old Melinda is. And I'm sure that, you all could say, well, 18 years of marriage with their kind of problems will do that to you. And so, okay, then my rebuttal to you then is that, well, we should have seen some of that 18 years. Like I said, like a minute and 30 seconds ago, instead of having to take their word for it, you need to show, not tell. Now, besides that, when it actually came to Melinda's craziness, it just felt like she was crazy just to be crazy and that there was no real basis for it. And it made no sense to me, and I thought that it was really lazy. So, I mean, at a certain point, it does seem like she kind of tries to blame her father, saying like, I got this craziness from my daddy or something like that. But I mean, like, I didn't know if they were trying to say that her family has like a family lineage of mental illness or what. But yeah, there was no real foundational understanding of her craziness outside of the fact that she's just crazy. And that's lazy, especially if your character themselves isn't extremely complex. And her character is not extremely complex. But then I'm sure that you all or someone out there could say, well, she's crazy because of her husband. The husband is the root cause of all of this. And so, okay, fine. Let's set Melinda off to the side and let's talk about Robert for a second. So young Robert is basically shown to us as being a con man. We are meant to look at him as someone that takes advantage of young, innocent Melinda. But then what we find out, and I guess this was meant to be the plot twist, I don't know, but what we find out is that Melinda is actually just crazy and that Robert isn't really a bad guy. But when you look at Robert, he's really not a good guy either. So what we see with this character is that, when they're younger, Melinda buys him a car and then he goes out and cheats on her. Then he spends all of the money that her dead mother left for her. He's not contributing to the family. Well, not the family. He's not contributing to the relationship financially. He ends up blowing out the electricity to the house that, again, Melinda's dead mother left for her. He ends up losing the house. And then he's not entirely truthful about him being in jail. Like, even if most of his intentions may have been pure, he wasn't, and even if he wasn't a con man, all of his actions are pretty damning to the point where we can at the very least look at his character and say he is an F-boy. And I can't say the actual word that I want to say because I guess censorship, but if you all know what I'm talking about, then you know what I'm getting at. And we all know how we feel about F-boys. We say no to F-boys, but that is exactly what Robert is in this scenario. So it's not as if Melinda's craziness isn't entirely justified. And so then bringing Melinda's character back into the equation, now I'm confused because the way in which they paint her character, it's as if she's crazy just to be crazy. But when we see everything that she's been put through, it's not as if her craziness doesn't have merit. So now I'm like, okay, so which one is it? Is her character crazy just to be crazy, or is her character crazy because of her husband? I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. Now, going ahead and looking at Robert's character, now looking at old Robert, so what we see is that he is a down and out, struggling and depressed man because his battery invention or something or whatever hasn't worked. And I found all of that, again, to be confusing because it's not as if young Robert shows the kind of investment is in his invention that would warrant this new and depressed Robert. What we see with Robert before the switch is what I basically already talked about. So we know that he cheated. He loses all of Melinda's mother's money. You know, he's not contributing financially to the relationship. If you notice, I didn't say anything about him being an inventor or anything about this battery invention because it's really not a central thing for his character. The most that we get to see are like two scenes. One where he's in this room and we see him like writing down some stuff. I mean, who knows what he was writing? I mean, well, maybe we do know in that moment, but I don't remember. The scene was really small. It's not really important. And then there's that other scene where he's looking like a, you know, mad genius of sorts. And then, you know, he plugs the plug into the wall and then the electricity blows out. That's it. That is all that we get to see with his investment, with his battery invention. And so then when we get to old Robert, and then this is all that his character revolves around, I'm like, where is this coming from? Like that whole moment where he throws like this temper tantrum, I was like, what is this? Like everything was just so confusing and just so inconsistent. And it's not good. So in terms of, other things in this movie, some of them may be nitpicky, some of them aren't. All that money that Tyler Perry has, and you all mean to tell me that he could not have gotten a better green screen? There were two instances where the young characters were walking, one at night and then one during the day, and it looked like some $20 green screen effect that someone who has never done green screen, could have done. Like, what? Come on, seriously. And then, besides that, so this movie itself, I guess if I had to describe it, it's like, it's part film noir, part Lifetime, part single white female, part Pursuit of Happiness, part Tyler Perry movie. Now, that may be surprising to you, or it may not be, I don't know, but what may surprise you is that this movie is also part thesaurus. They give you visuals because it is a movie, but if the visuals ain't enough, then they give you the narration. But then if the narration isn't enough, then they go ahead and give you these words with adjectives that get plastered up on the screen before, certain moments in the story so that you can understand what's clearly going on, just in case you had no clue. None of that was necessary because the scenes after those moments where they put up those words to tell us, oh, like in this moment they're going to be regretful, or oh, in this moment she's going to be bitter, or she's going to be whatever. We see that. So what was the point of showing us that? And then, besides that, they show, the money being the money that Melinda loses over the course of their relationship when they're younger. They just decide to put the number at the bottom of the screen and just show it deducted right in front of our eyes. I think that would have been a great moment to show just how invested young Robert is in this battery invention thing, and to show how, because of his investment in this invention, that it's driving a wedge between Melinda and Robert. But no, it's just used to show how much of an F-boy he is. Wasted potential. Now, besides that, Taraji being dragged off of that boat at the end of the movie, not once but twice, is one of the funniest things that I've seen in the movie. I would have to say the funniest thing that I saw in the movie, though, was when Taraji was fighting Robert in the yard. That was just, anytime that Taraji went off on anybody in the movie, it was just really comical. And then at the very end, now, this is really nitpicky, but it's stuff like this, y'all. It's stuff like this. So at the very end, after we see Taraji, the axe murderer, chop Robert's leg and everything has been solved and the people are coming over to tend to Robert, if you notice, when you see him like wiggling around on the boat, he's moving his leg as if that thing didn't just get chopped. It's small things like that. It's honestly everything that I've talked about, but it's small things like that as to why I can look you dead in your face and say that Acrimony is the worst movie that I've ever seen. With this movie, I can tell that Tyler Perry himself was sitting on his couch one day and was like, you know what, I want to make some money, so let me go ahead and put this thing together real quick, and let me go ahead and go after the market that I know will go up for this movie. Now, I do not want to offend anybody when I say this, but to all of the people out there that may fall within that market and that actually like this movie, or to the people that don't fall within that market but that still like this movie, or that went out to go see this movie because they thought that it looked good, Tyler Perry played y'all like a fiddle. Like, seriously. And I'm not saying that you can't like this movie. I'm not saying that you can't love it. And I'm not saying that you can't enjoy it. But you also need to know that he played y'all. He could have given you all a quality thriller drama. He is Tyler Perry, for crying out loud. Granted, I understand that, that name alone already comes with it like its own set of standards for movies. But He's Tyler Perry. You mean to tell me that this man that has been in the game for however long now, you mean to tell me that this man with all of this money, you mean to tell me that this man with all of these connections could not have come up with something better than that, or found someone that could come up with something better than that? Seriously? He gave y'all a low-budget amateur scrape from the bottom of the barrel, put together in 8 days piece of garbage. He gave y'all garbage, and I feel so bad for you all if you don't see that. Because he really, like, I'm not saying that the story itself, I mean, like I said, I still wasn't a fan of the story, but like the movie could have been good. It has potential. All of his movies always have potential, but it's like he just doesn't care. Like he's been in the game for this long, and the man has not shown any kind of growth whatsoever when it comes to his movies. Seriously? Anyways, I'm gonna leave it off at that. If you actually like this movie, or if after hearing me talk about this movie, you want to go out and see it, or you want to watch it or whatever, fine, go ahead, be my guest. I don't care. But to the people out there that actually think similarly to me, and if for some reason you do want to see this movie, I would say go into it with the, I can't believe that anybody thought this was a good idea. And I promise you, you will have a pretty enjoyable time, one that is probably filled with a bunch of laughter, because I laughed constantly throughout this movie, and not in a good way. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and leave it off at that. Moving on to another movie. Sorry to bother you. So, like I said, this is the most anticipated movie of the summer for me. You know, I knew that this was something that, you know, just from looking at the trailer, I knew that this was something that I had never seen before. And within that, the fact that it had Black people at the center and at the head of it, I was all in. You know, just the fact that this kind of movie existed, I knew that I had to see it. And I say that because, you know, usually speaking, when it comes to movies that center around Black people, what do we usually get? We get the struggle stories, we get the slave narratives, we get the hood urban dramas, we get the white savior stories, we get the occasional rom-com, sports, or biopics, or even, you know, the occasional intruder story. But you know, it's really rare that we get a movie with Black people at the center of it that is able to be more than just real life. You know, it's as if our movies hit this kind of glass ceiling that doesn't allow for, you know, our imagination to be what it really is, and that is limitless. You know, it's like they're saying you can exist in these areas, but if it's something outside of that, I don't know about that. And we know that we experience that kind of you know, setback in more ways than one, in, you know, in a lot of different facets of our life. And so, yeah, you know, to see a movie like this is just as weird and just as eccentric as it wants to be. I knew that I had a duty, not only as a movie lover, but also as a Black movie lover, to make sure that I go out and see this movie. And I have to say that I'm glad that I did. Now, in terms of who was a part of this movie, so it was written and directed by first-time movie director Boots Riley, and it stars Lakeith Stanfield, Tessa Thompson, Armie Hammer, Amari Hardwick, Stephen Yeun, Jermaine Fowler, David Cross, Danny Glover, and also Terry Crews. So there are a lot of people in this movie. Now, in terms of a synopsis for the movie, I mean, the only description that I'm going to give you, and this came straight from the director's mouth, is that this movie is an absurdist dark comedy with magical realism and science fiction inspired by the world of telemarketing. That is honestly all that you need to know about this movie before going into it. And I actually feel bad for anybody out there that went into this movie without, at the very least, hearing that kind of description, because this movie is a lot. And I do feel like, at the very least, having that kind of foundational understanding of the movie will help. But at the same time, like I said, this movie's a lot, so it's really not going to help too much, because you really do not know what you're getting yourself into with this movie. Now, the whole storyline of the Black guy, you know, having to use his white voice in order to move up in the world, I don't want to say that it doesn't play a huge part in the movie, because it does. But because there's so much other just like weird and outlandish and just crazy stuff that happens, it almost it will almost kind of feel like that storyline does kind of get left on the back burner, or like it was, or at the very least, it was just like it was used as a basis to bring in all of this other crazy stuff. So yeah, I'm not saying that that's a flaw or like a disappointment for me. It's just something that you may think, you know, when you come out of the movie after seeing it. So yeah, you definitely will probably go into this movie thinking that you know what it's about. And as you're watching the movie, you will probably think to yourself that you know what you are going to expect. And I'm telling you right now, you don't. This movie will blow away any kind of expectation or thought that you had for this movie. And I do think that that is the thing that works the hardest against the movie, but at the same time, I do think that it's the thing that works for this movie. So it really does create this kind of weird conundrum for me, because I don't think I'll ever really be able to figure out the movie, or at the very least anytime soon. Now, besides the elements that I had already discussed, this movie is also a political satire, and it's a rags to riches story. So like I said, you know, this movie definitely tackles a lot. And I do think that this is where the fact that this is Boots Riley's directorial debut, that this is where it really kind of shines through, because it's not as if everything that gets introduced to us is seen through properly. Like I did feel like there were certain storylines that suffered a bit. And so, yeah, like to me, it felt like Boots Riley was looking at this movie like, okay, you know what? This movie took forever to get made, and I don't know what the future holds for me. You know, the next movie that I make could very well take twice as long to get made, or if it even gets made at all, you know? So even though I don't necessarily know if this is going to be the only movie that I ever get to get made, I'm going to make sure that I milk this moment for what it's worth, and I'm going to do everything that I wanted to do. And like I said, in terms of this movie being a lot, I'm not necessarily mad at it. Even though this movie is a mess, it's a beautiful, weird kind of mess that I enjoyed. And I have to say that that did leave me speechless the first time I saw it, because I actually saw it twice. And that still leaves me speechless to this day, because I still don't really know how I feel about everything that I saw. And I know that for some people, not knowing how to feel about something is a turnoff for them. But for me, I welcome that kind of open-endedness, because then it really allows for, you know, my mind to just, you know, run wild with theories and ideas and meanings and all that kind of stuff that I think were a part of this movie. So this movie is very surreal and it's very absurd. And I'm saying that because you are going to go into this movie, you're going to be watching and you're like, this doesn't make any sense. But I'm telling you right now that because it is so surreal and so absurd, that it makes sense as to why it doesn't make sense. Like, that's the whole part of absurd, is making this chaotic and meaningless world for your characters. Now, besides that, you know, I definitely get, well, I'm sure that as you're watching this, you know, I do think that you'll get the feeling that, you know, even though this is probably the weirdest and wildest thing that you've ever seen, because of the world that gets created, I feel like you're at the end of the day going to know that this still works for the movie, and that if anybody else had tried to do something like this, that it just would not work. So yeah, it's like, it's this mess that just weirdly works. And I'm still really trying to wrap my mind around everything, like I said, but it's just know that it's a mess, but it works for this movie and it works for the story. Now, besides that, one of the things that I really loved about this movie was just the overall look of it. You all know how I feel about visuals. I am a sucker for visuals, and it definitely did not disappoint in this movie. The use of color was amazing. Y'all know I am also a sucker for color. So just to see that, you know, the bright world that, you know, that Boots Riley created for this movie, it was just, it really filled my heart. I also love the surrealistic and magical realistic elements to the movie, though I do wish that they would have played up all of that a little bit more. Like, I did love seeing, you know, the parts where they would make Cassius, you know, when he was, you know, doing the telemarketing job, how he would, like, they would thrust him right into, you know, his customers' living space or wherever they were when he would call them. I like that. And then when Cassius was, when he was going from rags to riches, that whole kind of sequence, seeing his life change, I really like that. And so yeah, I just wish that we could have seen a little bit more of that. Now, in terms of the acting, I do think that the acting suffered tremendously because of the syncing of the white voice to whatever character that was meant to have it, or should I say lack thereof. Now, I don't know if that was a stylistic choice or if that was something that they just had to deal with, but it was bad. You know, there were a lot of moments in this movie where David Cross, he plays Cassius's white voice in the movie, and you know, a lot of times David Cross's voice is like really lively, it's energetic, and it's enthusiastic and things like that. But then when you look at Lakeith Stanfield, his lips are barely moving, and yeah, it was just a lot of stuff like that I just, the syncing just really did not match up, and it really took me out of the movie a lot of times. Now, in terms of a character or actor that I think stood out to me, out of, if I had to choose anyone, it would have to be Armie Hammer as Steve Lift. I loved him as the villain. I think that he did a great job. But again, like, I do wish that we could have seen more of the villain, just because he is so wild and just eccentric and out there, that it would have been nice to have seen him a lot more than what we did get to see him. Now, in terms of Lakeith playing the disillusioned Cassius Green, I think that he did well as well. And I also did find him to be extremely relatable. You know, he's a character that worries about mattering in the world, and, you know, and that worries about his life having purpose. And I mean, besides that, he also exists in this big world that isn't made for him, but that he still needs to, at the end of the day, find a way to make it work for him. So it creates this conflict of, you know, like not wanting to be a part of this world, but, you know, here I am living in this world, here I am existing in this world. So what exactly is the right course of action that I should take, knowing everything that I know? And then, I mean, you know, by the end of the story, I don't think Cassius still really has a concrete answer to any of that. So yeah, I found his character to be really relatable. Now, speaking of the ending, I did not like it. I felt like so by this point in the movie, there's this really, really wild storyline that has been introduced to us that I feel like at this point of the movie, you're just now really starting to go along with. But after that storyline gets introduced to us, I felt like things just started happening a bit too rapidly, to the point where it seemed like to me they didn't really know how to end this movie, or they didn't really know where it was that they wanted to take this storyline. Now, besides that, also in terms of the ending, I felt like the editing was a bit jumbled in a certain scene. Now, this isn't to say that I didn't know what was going on, but when it came to like logistics, because I'm someone that's really like, I'm looking at like continuity errors and things like that, I just felt like things were a bit like it was a bit too jumbled, to the point where I was a bit confused as to what exactly was going on. Now, also, I felt like there were some resolved relationships that I still had questions about at the end of it, that that I felt like the resolving of the relationships wasn't done in a great way. But I just felt like, even though with this movie there's a lot that's going on, especially in the ending, there's a lot going on, but at the same time, I felt like there was a lot that still should have been explained to us, or that should have been showed to us. Now, overall, I have to say that I can tell you that I'm definitely going to appreciate this movie for what it is and what it represents to me. Like I said, this movie definitely left me speechless, and I'm sure that it will leave you speechless as well, but it's in an honestly good way. You know, it's definitely not going to be for everyone, because it is a lot and it is eccentric, it's out there. You know, this movie is a definite experience for whomever is watching it, but it's really like nothing that you've ever seen before, and for that, I believe that this movie has extreme value. Technically speaking, I don't think that this is the best movie that I've ever seen, and for that, I guess I do have to say that it didn't necessarily meet my expectations, because, like I said, it still has flaws, but I mean, even past the flaws, this movie is still pretty good. And above all of that, like I said, this movie is just a breath of fresh air. And I mean, what else have I been asking of the movie industry, and also like a bunch of other people? What else have we been asking of the movie industry but to be more original and to be more open to taking risks? Now, in terms of Black film in particular, I'm loving this new pattern that I'm seeing with movies like Sorry to Bother You and Get Out, where, you know, they're not afraid to really bend genres and create something entirely new. And so, yeah, like that's where I would love to see the future of Black film go. Well, honestly, film in general, but, you know, I'm Black, so I'm saying like that's where I would love to see Black film go, is to, you know, just be able to create things that aren't limited or boggled down by our own perceived limitations. So I would say that you should go see Sorry to Bother You. I'm telling you right now that you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it. But I think that because the movie is so polarizing in that way, that it is important that it is important and that everyone should see it. And so with that being said, that will end today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed these two reviews that I had for you. If you did, I've done 50 some odd other episodes thus far. Within the past weeks, I've done a bunch of other reviews. So, you know, if you've seen any new movies lately, I've probably talked about them. So make sure you check out those other episodes. I am here every week, 12:30 to 1, every Tuesday. In terms of next week's show, so there is a Netflix show that is going to be coming back on the 27th that I'm going to be talking about for next week's show. And I'm going to be bringing back the analysis part of the show. I feel like I have not done a real analysis in a really long time. So I'm pretty excited to, you know, get back to doing that. So yeah, if you know which show that I'm talking about, then make sure that you tune in for that, because yeah, I think it's going to be pretty good. Now, in terms of today's episode, if you had any comments, questions, or concerns about anything that I talked about today, please hit me up. I'm always down to have some discussions, either on Twitter at JORDI Reviews or on Facebook at Jordan CHISLEY. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I will see you all next week. All right. Bye.